Hey everyone, welcome back to Tim's Vinyl Confessions and welcome back to the latest edition of the Fleetwood Mac Deep Dive series. I am welcoming my good friend John, the music nut, to this particular episode. Hello, John.
Hello, Tim. It's great to be here again.
It's great to have you on here, and it's yeah, we've talked we talked Tusk, and now we're going to talk about an archival album that came out in 1995 called Fleetwood Mac at the BBC. And they've got all the band members named at the bottom. I suppose you could call this the classic lineup of the Peter Green era with Danny Kirwan, Jeremy Spencer, John McVie, McFleetwood, and of course the man himself, Peter Green. So this came out on Castle. The version I have is on Castle Communications, which is a UK company that licensed the tracks from BBC. So this is a double CD, and I'd mentioned to John that I had something very strange to show him, and this is the people that have watched my mail call unboxing episodes will have seen this, but when I got this, I was not expecting it to look like this, and I've never seen anything quite like it. This is what the cassette version of Live
Oh,
at the BBC looks like. So it's a giant uh, case with the tapes like this.
oh, I've never seen that before.
And I was talking to our friend Mike Ladano, and he says the only other tape collection that he's seen like this is also came out in 1995 was that Michael Jackson like History Part One, his
Okay.
best of. Apparently that came out in a two cassette set like this. But yeah, interesting. I've just never seen anything like that. Um, so these, of course, are BBC recordings, and most classic bands, especially if they were from the UK, did BBC sessions. I mean, Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple and Queen. It's great to hear them because they're generally really well done recordings. And
So,
there's a few things that I like about this. Again, we are talking about that early Fleetwood Mac era, the Peter Green blues era, which, if you love blues rock, if you love that straight ahead blues, this is, I'm sure that you've listened to this a million times and know it inside out. Um, for myself, and I think John and I, we talked about this too. It's interesting as historical artifact, and there are some great songs on here, but you get those 12 bar blues, and there's a lot of them. And after a while, it's hard to differentiate one from the other if you're not a hardcore blues aficionado. So, that said, there are, and I say this jokingly, but there are a lot of songs on here that I did not talk about in my book, The Sound That Haunts You, when I have my section on the other songs, but in my defense, this was not a major label release, so I'll give myself
okay.
some grace for that. It's always better to ask for forgiveness than permission. But there are some really cool performances of some songs that we know, and there's some songs that we don't know on here. So, um, John, for you listening to this, were there any songs that stuck out that you thought, oh yeah, that's kind of cool?
Sandy Mary, the
I
second track.
I I knew you were gonna. Yeah, to me that one jumped right out at me.
Yeah, because that's nasty. It's got this really dirty groove. You got some nice piano on there. You got this stop start rhythm in the bridge that works very well. I think the songs that are a little more rough around the edges are among my favorites. Another one is Only You.
Yeah, I didn't know that one.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I didn't know most of these songs until I picked up this collection. But this is more blues rock, and it's a
Yeah,
lot. It just it's just a balls out rocker, and it's really ragged, but it just sounds great. I mean, I say ragged. I mean, it's just I would say it's loose
yeah,
compared to some of the other stuff that's pretty structured 12 bar blues, except for the solos.
yeah,
Those songs really jumped out at me. I love the version of Preaching on here,
yeah.
and that I believe that's Jeremy Spencer on
I
it.
think so. Yeah, he's got that really, really raspy blues voice. Anytime you hear, "Oh yeah,"
Yeah,
That's Jeremy. Yeah, he was like 20 years old and he sang like he was a 50-year-old Delta blues man.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Um,
like, I'm
Sandy Mary I really like too. And apparently, reading the liner notes, If Peter Green had stayed in Fleetwood Mac, that would have been the title song of their next album. So what became Killenhouse? That's really interesting to think about, the what if.
Yeah, I saw that myself.
Yeah.
But to me, with particularly the tracks on the first disc,
Yeah, I think
when we're
so.
going blues, it sounds very good to great. But there's a lot of songs on here that are out of their element. It sounds more like 50s music.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. There's one that I was going to mention is that You Never Know What You're Missing. That's one that another one that Jeremy sings. And it sounds like Elvis. It sounds like Don't Be
Yes,
Cruel.
exactly.
You know, I want to sing Don't Be Cruel over it. And he could do that. He had that doo-wop kind of thing. And there's a lot of songs on Kiln House, like particularly the opening song, This Is the Rock. Have
Mhm.
he's got the echoed vocal and he really channels that early Elvis, the Sun Records Elvis. And that sounds just like it wouldn't surprise me if that was written for that album, you know. But
Exactly.
it's not a song that makes you think you're moving forward in time, right? Like
No, not at
it's
all.
just I like when there are some songs on here from Then Play On, which I think is a fantastic album.
Yes.
Like Crying is on here, and
Oh well, but you got oh well part one on here. Whereas
right. Well, that's on the deluxe, but it's not really part of the album.
okay,
Uh, but you're right, it's associated with that time period. But it seems to me there was at least one other song on here that was because I was like, oh, I know this. It's from Then Play On, unless it's one that's being covered up from the. Well, there goes one of the tapes. Um, I mean, Albatross is on here. That's not on any one album. That was a number one song for Fleetwood Mac. That
was
instrumental.
an instrumental.
Um, it's beautiful and it's not blues at all. Man of the World, that was another big song that wasn't part of an album. But there's other songs in here like Baby Please Set a Date, Blues with a Feeling, Linda, Mean Mistreating Mama. Like they weren't on any of the Fleetwood Mac albums, and I don't think they were on um, the Chicago Blues Jam sessions either. So
Right.
they're unique to this, but all very well played. It's just your personal preference of, what type of stuff you like to hear. But yeah, it does make you wonder what another Fleetwood Mac album would have sounded like because you were getting into, Led Zeppelin was out by now, and Deep Purple had changed from sort of psychedelic to harder rock. Makes you wonder what another Fleetwood Mac album would have sounded like with Peter Green at the helm.
And plus Danny Kirwan was taking a bigger role in the
Yeah,
songwriting by the time, especially by the time House came in. So,
yeah.
and Peter was always trying to push Danny out more to the forefront because for all of his talents, he wasn't the most confident guy.
No, no, he's a very shy kid. I could say he was a kid. He was young, he was very
Right.
young when he joined, and very talented, good singer. And I mean, even after Peter Green left, you listen to Future Games and Bare Trees, his contributions are fantastic. So he wasn't just a blues guy. He could write in different styles. What I think is cool about this is that it's also got stuff from Kiln House. So it's got Honey Hush, Buddy's song, like it's got songs that surpassed Peter Green's era. So it's really fascinating to have them all here in one place. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be something that I keep returning to, but there's certainly nothing wrong with it. And if you're really into this period and you don't have this, you definitely want to seek this out because this is right up your alley, and it's BBC recording, so it's really good
Yeah,
quality.
the sound quality on these, I mean, how they restored the sound on these, I mean, after and these recordings were supposedly lost forever. And then a fan about reached out to Mick Fleetwood about getting these, and then they worked with the BBC and were eventually able to get their hands on these. It's live at the BBC, but most of the time you don't hear a crowd on here. It's
No, it was recorded for BBC broadcast, so it's very much everybody quiets down and
right,
you've got the host introducing them. This isn't quite like I'm always amused by the Deep Purple in concert, which is their BBC recordings from I think 70 and 72, and they'll be just about to play a heavy song like, all right, now here's another song, but from the Machine Head album. This is called Space Trucking. Like,
Right.
I think there's not so much of that on here. There's maybe in the beginning. There's
Yes.
Rattlesnake Shake. Obviously, that's from yeah,
Yes.
duh. That's from Then Play On. That's fantastic version of that. Yeah, it's good. It's got a lot of the songs. Like if I was going to mix this down, I could probably make a single disc out of this and listen to it a lot.
I
There's a
agree
lot
with
of good
that.
stuff on here, and the other stuff is just not stylistically, just not to my personal taste. But yeah, this is a must for fans of early Fleetwood Mac, and I'm sure that people that were really into that era of the band when this came out, this was a major event. Like, oh, I can't believe this is. It's like when Led Zeppelin's BBC sessions were released in '98. It was like, or '97. This is a big deal, right? People had been listening to poor quality bootleg versions, and now they've cleaned them up, and it's really amazing. I mean, I know they always like to have that whole thing about, oh, the tapes were lost, and we had
Yeah.
to bake them to get them this one last time. Every band does that. They always make it sound like they were just on the brink of losing everything, but somehow miraculously, whether all that's true is besides the point. It does create some buzz and excitement, but it is kind of surprising when you figure these were probably sitting somewhere, reels of tape, and
Hmm.
tape naturally degrades on its own. And I don't really hear any places on here where there's any real dropouts in sound. So
I don't either.
they must have been kept in a, a temperature, kept in the right temperature and whatever. And so, yeah, I mean, there is a lot of talk about things that got lost, like, from the BBC because they didn't realize how important they were, like episodes of Doctor Who and things like that,
Right.
things that were just, sometimes things are lost. They're lost. They're just gone. They're
Yeah.
gone now. If sorry, but they're gone. But in some, a lot of cases, they're managed to find something. So there's probably, an album's worth of songs on here that didn't appear on any other album. But as it stands, it makes for a nice collection.
It does, and it gives you a broader perspective of who Fleetwood Mac is. I mean, if you go by like the Cliff Notes version, oh, they started out as a blues band. Well, blues was the core, but if you listen to this collection, they were trying a lot of other different things. They were trying stuff that was similar to Buddy Holly,
Yeah.
and they do an Everly Brothers song on
Yeah,
here.
that's right. When Will I Be Loved? That's right.
When
Yeah.
Will I Be Loved, which is decent, but it's not
Yeah,
make you forget the Linda Ronstadt version.
exactly. Yeah.
What was interesting on here, the version of Honey Hush, Big Joe Turner.
Yeah.
I only knew the Foghat version,
That's right. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's
And
like twice the speed.
they sped it right up. And yeah, on the Kiln House episode, I talk about that because it's about the same as that ended up being on Kiln House.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they almost did Honey Hush like it was Train Kept a Rolling.
Yes,
That's how they did it. It's really good, the Foghat version. But yeah, the version that's on here is similar to the one. Yeah, I love the fact that there's Kiln House stuff on here. It's kind of like I'm trying to think of a similar situation. It's kind of like if there Oh, it didn't happen, but it's kind of there's always those rumors about there's demos from Back in Black with Bon
right.
Scott. Well,
Yes,
what if there was? This is kind of like that, um, but not really. But that kind of thing, or even on the Deep Purple one, they're still doing like Mandrake Root, even though Ian Gillan's singing now. So it's cool. It's stuff that you wouldn't normally get.
exactly. Yeah, that's what's really cool about it. And what I will say is like when you listen to the second disc, and yes, we're getting a lot of 12 bar blues. It's a more consistent disc, but I think what happens is the songs that are covers start to sound a little monotonous because
Yeah.
you're getting that same 12 bar blues over and over. Then when you get into the originals written by Peter and Danny, then I think they really stand out.
That's just it. And it was such a small period of time because they started making recordings in 67. First album came out in 68. By 1970, Peter Green was gone.
Yes.
They did a lot in that short amount of time. Like from that first album to Then Play On, it's like a year and a half. But Then Play On is a much different animal because by the time that album came out, there's still blues stuff on it. There's still stuff like crying, but there's others, there's different things on there. They're
Yes.
trying different things and they're moving forward. And it's interesting with Then Play On because Spencer's very minimally on that
Yes.
album. It's mainly Green and Kirwan, and they were the forward thinkers. And you get to Kilnhouse, which Jeremy is kind of the leader of it. It's very retro. It's got Buddy's song, and it's got the songs that sound like Elvis. It's got the old country sounds to it.
Yes.
Very, very different. But then, then he left too. Kind of something it does make me think of that's very, very close is when you see that old footage of Rush performing at that high school in 1974 with John Rutsey on drums, and they do Best I Can,
Hmm.
which ended up on Fly By Night. So it's like, eras colliding, right? That's kind of what you get here. Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah, that's that's an excellent example right there.
yeah,
You're getting those you're getting a lot of cool stuff, a lot of cool covers, particularly on disc one, but then you're seeing the evolution of Fleetwood Mac as well. Maybe we're not getting the Fleetwood Mac that the masses would know,
right.
but you're getting the evolution.
Yeah.
What do you think of this album, the recordings not being chronological?
I kind of wish they were because usually they are. They
Yes.
usually are, and that usually gives you a much better. You can hear the progression. Like Queen's on air, the BBC stuff is fantastic. It starts in '73 and it
Mm.
goes to '77, and all of those sessions are in order. I wish they'd have done that here because yeah, there's songs from their first album towards the end of the whole thing. Um, I kind of wish they'd done that, and it would also be, but I don't know. It was a creative choice. Maybe I don't know. I kind of wish they had done that because I think it would have given you you can hear the progression
The
as
evolution,
it goes,
yes.
but just in a matter of months, right? Months and in a year, another year, like very, very, very small amount of time. I think like the Zeppelin sessions are from like 69 and 71. And what a huge
Really.
difference between 69 and 71. Same thing here. They were changing. I wonder now what would have happened if obviously when Bob Welch joined, they eventually ended up moving to the States as a band. But it's too bad we didn't have BBC sessions from those early 70s albums either.
I agree
That
with
would
that
be really,
completely.
really cool.
Oh yeah, I would love to hear those because
Yeah.
yes, yeah, just to hear those blueprints of because they were changing a lot by that point. Once
Yeah.
well, they became more of what we would know and love.
Very much so, yeah. And another thing you mentioned, it wasn't the Fleetwood Mac everybody knew. I was struck by the fact that two songs that aren't on here that I was a little bit surprised, and I'm just double checking to make sure I'm right, but I think I am. They don't do Black Magic Woman,
No,
which is a surprise, and they don't do the Green Manalishi,
yeah, I thought about
which
that too.
which were two of their biggest, best well-known songs at this point. And because they were BBC sessions, I'm a little surprised they didn't do both parts of Oh Well. But
Okay,
because they would have been set up for it, right? Like it wasn't a live concert where, but hey, we get what we get, and what we got was pretty good.
exactly. I have to say though, I'm listening to, on disc two. You're listening to all this kick-ass blues. Your Long Gray Mare is so good, and then the kick-ass version of Sweet Home Chicago, and then we're going into that. We're staying in that same vein there for a little while, and then we go into Linda.
Yeah,
That's Sheila by Tommy Rowe with different lyrics.
that's why that sounded so familiar to me. I'm like, I know
Yep,
this song, but why is it not coming to me?
it's
That's
Tommy Rowe.
exact. That is exactly right.
Yeah, it's just different lyrics, and the lyrics aren't half as good. I'm like,
That's
what the devil's this?
But you know what? A lot of blues songs are like that. They were adopted, and that's why sometimes it's so hard to know who actually wrote something or where it originates from, and that's why it's just called traditional. Or in the case of Led Zeppelin, sometimes that's why Jimmy Page and Robert Plant just stuck their names on
Right.
it. And again, I've said this many times. If you're a Zeppelin fan and you've never checked this Fleetwood Mac stuff out, you should because, well, um, what is it? I believe my time ain't long. That's by any other like with different name, different lyrics. What song is that? That's a
Dust My Broom. It sounds a lot like Dust My Broom.
yeah, it's Dust My Broom, but what did Zeppelin called it something else?
Oh,
Um, oh geez, I should know this.
I've never heard the Zeppelin BBC sessions. I've heard Canned Heat do, I believe My Time Ain't Long. Their version's really cool.
Oh, you know what it is? I think that if you listen to that song on the last song on Led Zeppelin 3, that Hats Off to Harper,
That's off to Roy Harper.
you can hardly hear what it is with underneath all the distortion and stuff, but it's kind of like that.
Okay.
Um, there is another song on the first Fleetwood Mac album under a different name that's essentially How Many More Times.
Okay.
So there's a lot of back and forth there. Jimmy Page has always talked about Peter Green and Fleetwood Mac in the early days, but I don't know. I don't really know what much more to say about it, John. I mean, it's not an album that you go in depth and study the lyrics or anything like that, but it's an entertaining collection, and I'm glad we have it to listen to.
Agreed. Like other things that jumped out at me, Long Gray Mare. I don't know if you ever listen to Rory Gallagher.
Boy, I've heard a lot about him. And I know that he covered what was it, this song? In my book, I've got covers of Fleetwood Mac songs, and I know
Right.
he covered at least one of their songs, and I'm trying to find out which one it is. Um, hold up now.
I have it too. Maybe
Okay,
I'll.
so okay, no, the version of Long Gray Mare that I listed is from Mick Abrams or Abrahams, who
Oh,
was
from Jethro
Jethro
Tull.
Tull. But I know there's a Rory Gallagher. I know Rory Gallagher's in here somewhere. He did a song called "Leaving Town Blues."
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. If you listen to Long Gray Mare here, it's very early Rory Gallagher. Like what he was doing with Taste.
Okay.
Yeah, it sounds a lot
Well,
like.
see, there's a lot. There's so many connections because you've got Taste, and then you've got the originals, the band that was called Skid Row that
Yes.
had Gary Moore.
More.
Now, Gary Moore was a disciple of Peter Green. Um, and at one time he owned his guitar, the
Yes.
one that Kirk Hammett owns now.
Right.
Um, and then, of course, then you've got Thin Lizzy, and I'm sure. I mean, like, in the UK. Fleetwood Mac was a big deal. All these young guys were listening to him, and not just young guys, but guys that were just sort of contemporaries of theirs, the same age, were,
Mm.
they just, Fleetwood Mac got popular right away. It's highly influential on so many artists that this era does not get the credit for.
Yes, exactly. And let's not forget Peter Green was a wonderful, very distinctive guitar player. The tracks on here, he's playing harmonica on some of these
Yep.
songs. He was no slouch on a harmonica either. He does a very good job.
Yeah.
Songs.
You, and the other thing that I like about not so much Spencer's more of the strict blues man if he's not doing like the Elvis or the Buddy Holly,
Right.
right? But Peter Green and Danny Kirwan, they weren't that case of okay, well, you're a blues guitarist, well, you also sing. They could act, they were good singers
They
too.
were.
They weren't just, well, you kind of put up with it because their guitar playing's so good, right? It's not
Mhm.
like that. They could actually sing. So it's very entertaining stuff.
What I do like also about the second disc is while we're still in that blues vein for a lot of the Green and Kerwin originals, the rhythm section of John and Mick are changing things up too. Looking for somebody's very tribal to me, and it's
Yes.
more of an emphasis on the harmonica than it is
Yeah.
guitars.
Yeah, they love doing that tribal stuff. If you listen to a song, it's not on here, but the first song and then play on that Coming Your Way.
Mm-hmm.
Like Mick just goes nuts on the percussion there. So yeah, that adds a lot of excitement.
Exactly, and then you have we have Albatross. I mean, I'm
Beautiful.
it is beautiful, and
Yeah.
what I'm the liner notes is Peter had that for a while, but it was just missing something, and Danny Kirwan added that extra guitar part on there, and that was and then the song was complete.
Yeah.
So but it just sound it's funny. We call him an island. I'm sorry. We call him a blues band. That sounds like something you'd hear. It sounds like island music a little bit in the way
Yeah.
execution.
Yeah, like I've called Albatross Fleetwood Mac's first yacht rock song
There you
because
go. Exactly.
it sounds like you're at the beach. It sounds like you're by water,
It does.
just taking it easy, like. But it's not, and it's not, and yet it is blues. You
Hmm.
listen to the but dun, 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 dun,
Yeah.
dun, but it's the dressing on top of it that takes it
Yes.
somewhere different.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, but oh God, but there's some of the live songs on here where you may hear a crowd. They're
yeah,
playing a lot of vigor. So
yeah,
you understand why they were such a big thing live in England and or in Europe. We have, and like the variety, like I said, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. There's a straight up cover of Tim Harden's Hang On to a Dream turn as a piano ballad. You
yeah,
know, it's out of their element, but it's still well done. So I think, but I would go back to your original points. If you cut this down to one disc and even a 55, 58-minute disc, because these both these discs are about 58 minutes or so,
yeah,
you take this down to the best tracks, this would be killer.
yeah, yeah. Um,
But we're getting like the kitchen, everything but the kitchen sink here. So.
yeah, I think it's the fact that, look, here's what we found.
Right.
Here's what we found, and
Yes.
here's your CDs. You can skip the tracks unless you unless you get this weird cassette version. And that's the other thing. Where am I? How am I going to store this? Like what?
Exactly.
Awkward. Anyway, it's funny. It's a lot of fun. And one other thing I do want to mention about that this is kind of funny. It's kind of neither here nor there as far as the music that's on here, but um, my good friend Harrison, who from Grab a Stack of Rock, has guested a couple times on the deep dive, and he's always looking for live recordings from all eras of Fleetwood Mac. And the era he's had the hardest time finding material from is that weird mid '90s period where they had the Time album, they had Dave Mason and Becca Bramlett, and every time he goes to search Fleetwood Mac live 1995, this is all that comes up because this came out in
Oh,
1995. I said, well, try 1994 because they were touring on that album before it came out. So
there
anyway,
you go.
so yeah, though that's Fleetwood Mac live at the BBC. I'm curious out there what people think of this. Like I said, I know people that are into this era will just love it and deservedly so. So, John, I want to thank you for coming on again and talking Fleetwood Mac. This has been a lot of fun exploring, going way, way back up to the present and talking about this amazing band and all of the metamorphoses, metamorphosi that they've gone through. Don't forget, Sound That Haunts You, Beginner's Companion of Fleetwood Mac. You won't find any mention of Live at the BBC in there. I apologize, but there it is. John, thanks for doing this. Don't forget, follow John on YouTube, and I will have the link below. And we'll see you next time on the Fleetwood Mac Deep Dive.